Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Daily Fantasy Digest podcast, the all-inclusive podcast where we talk all things fantasy sports to help give you an edge. I am your host, Joe Bewer, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, fellow Chicagoan and diehard Cubs fan like myself. I have Will Applebee, co-host of the Between the Lines podcast over on DraftKings, as well as the owner of Not Sports Center. Will, how's it going?
Not bad. The Cubs did a lot better today, so I'm happier in that regard.
I know traveling to Coors is never a good thing, but they ended up pulling out the win. Hamels pitched quite a gem today, which was nice to see.
Especially at Coors, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, no kidding. So, just for everybody who's listening, we're going to be, going over some MLB talk today. Just kind of, running through kind of like a quarter way through the season type of thing, DFS industry talk and stuff like that. But before we get into that, just for everybody in the podcast, I'd like to give Will the floor to kind of go ahead and give us a little bit of intro on how he got into, DFS and where he's at today.
Well, all right. Well, I'm by no means a massive, I'm not Awesemo by any means, necessary. I'm nowhere near that level. I'm pretty much, just, some dumbass who has some extra money to, screw around with on DFS. But no, it's funny. Somebody I know through Not Sports Center actually promoted FanDuel, and he was what he was doing was he was getting money for every sign up. So he's like, well, why don't you sign up for this and get me some money? I'm like, why not? So I did, and then 4 years later, here I am still playing. So that's actually kind of how I was first introduced into daily fantasy sports. And then DraftKings came around and said, why don't you be on our podcast? I'm like, okay, cool. So here we are.
So you've just been, running the podcast with Eric and Garion ever since?
Yeah, we're about 26 or 27 episodes in now. We just switched to video yesterday, actually, for the first time.
Yeah, that's a big move right there. That's exactly where I'm trying to head, especially for that engaging the audience feel,
Yeah, it's a little weird though, like because you're kind of just like you're just like sitting there staring at the screen. And it's the most awkward feeling. Like it's good and it's weird at the same time.
Yeah, I know. I hear you there. So yeah, just before we go ahead and get everything, if you guys wouldn't mind just going and checking out the Between the Lines podcast, I'm definitely a big recommender of that podcast. I've listened to it a few times myself. Just crazy good information regarding any and all things DFS. So yeah, if you could go ahead and check that out, I'm sure everybody over there would greatly appreciate that. So a lot of people have been, hitting me up lately on DMs, kind of asking me, what my midseason thought is, kind of through the year so far for MLB DFS. I've personally played every day, so I've known the struggle. And things to target and what not to target. So I'm interested to hear kind of your thoughts as to as far as pitching is concerned. Who's kind of your standout pitchers so far through the year as it pertains to MLB?
Well, for me, it's pretty wild. Like for as many as home runs have been hit this year, there's actually been a lot of really good pitching results.
I know, it's
so
crazy.
You would think like when there's record-setting home runs, you wouldn't have all these pitchers out here dealing. But I mean, you have guys like Mike Soroka, well, at least until tonight, which he's had a little bit of issues tonight. But even guys like him, guys like Verlander, guys like the names go on and on in a season where there's a record number of home runs, which is just it makes no sense to me, but it's coming off. They're pulling it off somehow.
I know it's definitely been interesting because just from following the trend so far, it seems like a lot of people are kind of fading the 10K pitchers, 11K pitchers, especially on DraftKings, and just the middle of the pack guys are just providing the same upside, and you're saving $3,000.
Yeah, well, I mean, because you kind of feel like guys like a Joey Lucchesi can get out there and kind of put up similar numbers, and then cut back a few dollars and not have to rely on the Baltimore Orioles to give you offense. So,
Yeah, I agree. It's been definitely weird. There's been definitely some teams to target, but some sort of breakout pitchers that I'd really like to just touch on really quick. Jake Odorizzi on the Twins has been kind of my go-to guy this whole year before he got overpriced. I mean, 9-2, 1.2 ERA, just an insane amount of Ks. Last year was complete terrible. He was actually targeted last year with bats against him. So it's pretty
Him and
wild.
Barrios too, kind of the same roller coaster he's been on.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, Odorizzi has definitely been a play for me this year, and Barrios as well. But I think for me, my favorite pitcher to play so far this year has definitely been Charlie Morton. I think that the Rays have just kind of turned it around this year, acquiring Morton and then having Snell as well as like their ace. Morton's just been absolutely incredible this whole year, and I think that from a DFS standpoint, the price tag for him has just been so low for how well of a pitcher he was, because he was even great on the Astros. Even when he was relieving and starting it, sometimes he was just incredible. And he's pretty much a lock and load play for me, no matter the opponent. I mean, he's pitching scoreless innings at Fenway, so it's incredible for me to see that from a DFS standpoint.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising for a guy to just on a team where they've started the whole opener trend. That at the same time they have these aces that just come out there and dominate pretty much every start.
Hate the opener trend. Hate it.
So do I. I mean, I'm not.
It's like a waste.
I mean, from an analytics standpoint, I guess. I guess there's some logic to it, but it's just. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see the point in bringing in a reliever or like potential closer for one inning. I mean, I guess it helps.
And you have to pay attention too. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but you
No,
have to pay attention too. Like with DFS, like you don't want to, because in the past until the last year or so, you wouldn't have to worry about picking a starter who's only going to go an inning.
right, and
Now
it's
now you've got to do your research and make sure you don't oh whoops, I picked an opener.
right. I know, and it's kind of weird because it's like you might be targeting that opener thinking he might go a few innings, picking if he's a lefty pitcher, you might pick righty bats, and then they bring out their starting righty for 5 straight innings, and then your whole lineup's just absolutely screwed.
Right. Yeah. It can flip on you very easy, and then at the same time, you can always kind of go after the reliever that comes in after the opener. Maybe you want to run him out there because he's real cheap, and you get like 5 innings and squeeze out 20, 25 points out of them pretty cheap.
Yeah,
And
and
just load up on offense.
right, and I think that's been a trend this year for the most part. Has been paying down for pitching, but there's been one pitcher in particular that has just been absolutely god awful last year, like bottom of the barrel last year, targeting in every possible scenario, and then this year, he's ranked fifth in ERA, and that's Lucas Giolito on the White Sox. Kind of came out of absolutely nowhere, and just kind of figured out how to pitch. And
And he's been crushing it
I
too.
know.
Like I mean, he hasn't even he's been dominating. So that's a pretty wild jump.
It's been really weird to see, pitchers like Verlander and Cole kind of not. I mean, they're in the mix, but like these new and upcoming pitchers are like kind of taking over the reins a little bit so far in the season, and it's just been really weird to see because it's not something we're used to, and we're actually starting to see the chalk lines move from a player like Verlander, to a player like Giolito or like Jose Barrios instead, just because of the savings. Because I think this has to be some sort of record year for bats. Bats is just so expensive. If you're at Coors, you have to pick the two lowest pitchers to even get a piece.
Oh yeah, I mean Rizzo today was on FanDuel was 4,700. So
Yeah, it's just like mind-boggling to me. So, for you this year, as far as like offensive power, where are you seeing, the biggest kind of surge in offensive power from a team, regardless of matchup?
it would be the Twins, really.
Yeah,
I mean that's the first team that comes to mind because like it just feels like every night you're like, oh well, here's a good chance to load up on the Twins as they come out and crush somebody.
yeah. I mean, do you think they have the potential to go far in the playoffs and compete. I mean, we always talk one game or 2 game, maybe 3 game series, but in a best of 7. I mean, you go up against the Astros, you're getting an ace every night.
They feel very much like a team that um, goes down in the ALDS to me because it feels like they're too boomer bust. And when you're totally power, your offense is totally power reliant, and you can't get any power. It's good night. It's very like almost Houston Rocket esque,
Yeah,
in baseball. The Rockets overly rely on the three. The Twins really rely on the home run a lot. So, I mean, they're definitely a good team. Don't get me wrong. It just they feel ripe for, that kind of a result. But who knows? I mean, like their offense is just loaded. Like
right. I mean, top to bottom, they have the whole. I mean,
they were rolling along, and I didn't want to say cruising.
Yep, I was just gonna say the same
Yeah,
thing,
they were rolling along, and then they brought Nelson Cruz back,
and it's
and
been better.
yeah, so I mean, they didn't even need him. So it's been pretty wild to see, especially when they just gave Escobar away last year.
Yeah, I know it was mind-boggling to me, but it seems like it's kind of almost paid off, and you have people stepping up. Max Kepler's been incredible this year. They acquired C.J. Cron from the Rays, been incredible this year. Marwin Gonzalez from the Astros. So, I mean,
Arwin Gonzalez has really taken
I
what
know.
seems like a step, and Eddie Rosario has really turned into an elite player, and they're definitely loaded. I don't want to be too hard on them, but it'd be interesting.
I know.
It's that to see if they can keep it up.
What are your thoughts on Tampa Bay?
I mean, that's another one. Like, I still can't believe the Pirates gave up Austin Meadows for
I know.
Chris Archer. What are they doing?
I know. I mean, now you see Austin Meadows just hitting absolute bombs.
And then they stole Tommy Pham away from the Cardinals, which we're both happy about.
Yeah, no kidding.
Tampa's another one of those teams. It feels like they're just ready. You're just waiting for them to fade, and then the season gets farther and farther and farther along, and they're still right there, right around first place, or like a half game behind the Yankees.
Yeah.
I mean, with Snell and Morton and some of these guys on offense, like it feels like they may have some staying power.
I know, and it seems like they're the only team that really gets the whole opener game to really work to their benefit when they pitch guys like Ryan Stanek, and then they bring in Yarbrough for like 6 innings, and he ends up just pitching a gem. And it seems like they're the only team who's kind of actually gotten it to work.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
They have the opener magic, whatever that is.
I know. So I want to jump to that NL side. Cubs' chances this year. How do they look? Brewers.
A lot better with Kimbrel.
Yeah, a lot better. I think they stand a chance against the Brewers.
Oh yeah, I felt that way before Kimbrel. It's beyond the Brewers was what I was worried about.
Yeah, now
because the bullpen was just a mess, but Kimbrel changes everything.
Yeah,
so.
I mean it changes the end of the game, but it doesn't change the middle.
That's true.
That's
true.
The only part that is really scary about the Cubs game right now, and their ability to kind of stay up the top there is once the starter comes out and you get somebody like Carl Edwards in there, and you just honestly cross your fingers and hope he can get through the inning, to be honest.
Yeah, well, you do more than cross your fingers. You start praying to whatever deity you believe in. So, but the thing that I think has been the biggest, and I think the most overlooked factor when it comes to the Cubs, and like I haven't really seen much of anyone say anything about this, is the lack of having a guy like Dexter Fowler on the top of the order. Because Madden has been trying everything that he can. He rolls Rizzo out there sometimes, which is fun and hilarious, but it doesn't last. So
I mean, Schwarber's been the best option so far that I've seen as far as production.
Yeah, he's doing okay.
Yeah, I mean he's hitting homers.
Oh yeah. I mean, but he's somebody. Ideally, I would prefer him to be behind Baez and Rizzo and Bryant, and we get if somebody I was thinking of, and I read like the Mariners were trying to just get rid of him.
Malik
Would be an
Smith.
interesting move. Well, not. Well, I don't think they're trying to get rid of him.
That would be awesome, though.
But if they were trying to get rid of him, I'd happily take him. But no, it's. I was thinking of D. Gordon
Oh, yeah.
because of it's looking like Zobrist isn't coming back.
No, and we need a guy who gets on base and can get to second. That's the problem is we don't have.
And I think D. Gordon could be the closest thing to. I don't know if he is what he was, but I mean I think he could be the closest thing to a 2016 Dexter Fowler, that the Cubs are going to find.
Yeah, I know. I wish
that wouldn't cost like an Eloy Jimenez to try to trade for.
I wish they would. I honestly wish they would reinstate Ian Happ. I think.
I'm not sure what's happening there.
I know. I wish. I mean, him hitting leadoff would definitely not be the worst thing to happen.
No. That's worth. Yeah, that's a name like I don't know, and it was I was laughing because somebody thought they found Ian Happ's burner because he was just he was tweeting all these motivational things at Ian Happ and retweeting all these links. Come on, Ian Happ, you can do it, Ian Happ. You're the man, Ian Happ. which if it is his burner and he's talking to himself, that's
absolutely hilarious.
That is, that I will say. I won't say things I could say.
Yeah.
But he's definitely an option. Or at least I would think. Who knows what they're doing with him?
Yeah, I know. It's definitely been interesting to see the rotation this year. I mean,
I think that's really to me the weakest part, and why the Cubs offense tends to go like, either for 10 or 11 runs or 1 run.
Yep.
It's just there's just no. It's very Twins-esque, although I think the Twins have with Kepler
they figured it out. Yeah,
have a better leadoff situation.
Yeah, I agree.
But, I think that's one of the biggest problems for the Cubs. It will be, I think, come playoff time.
Yeah, and I think from a DFS standpoint, a lot of people try to target leadoff hitters, especially when you're building your lineups.
The speed, yeah,
exactly.
Like Malik Smith was, damn near the minimum.
I know.
For a while. So he was an easy one, and he steal 2 or 3 bases, and he put up 20 or 30 points with just a single or two.
Yeah, and that's what you need. And I mean, like tonight, building a lineup around the Mariners, Malik Smith's 3.9K on DraftKings. He gets a single, and it's an automatic stolen base. Like it's just one of those people that you just don't throw at. It's players like Billy Hamilton as well, and other people that are just prone to steal bases, and it just works for them. And that's something that a lot of people from a DFS standpoint look at. And when you have somebody leading off like Kyle Schwarber, you're not looking for him to steal bases. You're looking at him for hit a leadoff homer, but only if the matchup's right. Luckily today he did hit one, not leadoff, but he got there. But it's one of those things that
I would like to watch him steal a base.
I would love to. It would be the catcher would have to fall asleep for at least 3 minutes, and then we might be able to get there.
Catcher might be in a coma.
Yeah, I know. So, one thing I do kind of on this podcast is, I tend to ask everybody, a series of the same questions, just because I think it's interesting to hear everybody's point of view from the industry talk type of standpoint. Now, how often do you play DFS, and which sports do you play the most?
Fairly regularly. For me, it's probably football, I guess. I mean, because I know the most about football, so I try to, I probably put my most down on football. But basketball, I feel like basketball is probably, of football, basketball, and baseball, basketball is probably the quote-unquote most predictable. So, I mean, I think that's an appealing thing as far as DFS goes, because there's a lot less randomness, because, it's, you have games that go like 120, 108. There's so many scoring events that, the skill eventually wins out. Whereas like with baseball and football, like a fumble or a 1 home run from a 7-hole hitter nobody was paying attention to, that could change, especially on the depending on the side. Like if it's a 2 or 3 game slate, and the games are real low scoring, that the randomization can really kill you. Basketball, there's some of that, and what I don't like as far as basketball, as far as FanDuel goes, is I feel like blocks and steals are too. When they made the change to the points, um, I didn't. I thought I feel like they're overvalued on there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that hinders them is I'm a big fan of players being dual eligible at positions. I think it just kind of favors the
That
whole lineup
too,
making
yeah,
process and late swap.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think DraftKings definitely has the edge, and it's funny I'm talking so much about FanDuel as I work on a DraftKings
Yeah.
podcast. But
I mean, do you play
it's a
baseball? Like, do you play MLB DFS often?
yeah, fairly regularly. Yeah.
So there's a topic on this podcast that's come up a few times. We've gotten some mixed reviews. So how are you? I mean, are you a GPP or a cash player?
I mean, I'm trying to be. I tend to take too many risks in GPP, so I'm trying to cut it down to basics. This summer and play a little more cash. So, I don't think that, I wouldn't really opt one way or the other.
Okay, so I mean, a mix of both.
Yeah, that's probably the most reasonable answer.
So I'm not the biggest fan of this, but lineup providers have come up as a pretty heavy topic on this podcast before, and I'm interested to hear your take on that because if you join a 10 entry max GPP contest, you go in there at the top, everybody's splitting the pot because 500 people have the same lineup.
Yeah, I mean, there's upsides and there's downsides to it. I think part of the problem between all the different providers, or the not providers, but the different services. I don't know what you want to call FanDuel, DraftKings, leagues. You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But between FanDuel, DraftKings, Fantasy Draft, everybody else, they all have different policies on this, and I think one way you could kind of avoid some of the trouble is maybe you make an industry-wide policy on what is acceptable and what isn't.
Right.
And I think that would probably give some more transparency to the whole thing.
Right. So I know DraftKings policy is that you can't post full lineups. You can post
you can do core plays.
Right, you can do core plays. FanDuel, you can post full lineups. They don't care. So for me, it's a little interesting because everybody does core plays. I do slate breakdowns 4 times a week. I do my core plays. That's just me giving out free content. I mean, it just doesn't. There's no way that people can make consistent money when DK Live gives out core plays by 3 different providers every day. But Colts Lover 88 gives out his plays for $150 a season. And they're roughly the same as everybody else because you can tell chalk lines, and I'm confused as to the point.
Confused as to the point for who?
For charging for lineup providers. You know what I mean? Because there's so much free stuff out there. Like,
well, I don't think. Well, I mean, it's I guess long story short, I guess it's like basic economics. Like there's a supply of, or there's a demand for expert knowledge, and there's that people have made a business out of it. Like, as somebody who has turned a Twitter account into a business, I can't really throw stones in that regard. But I do think as far as FanDuel, DraftKings, and I would think it would be good for the DFS industry as a whole that if they created some sort of uniform rules for all of them, because I think for the casual player, the people who don't know a whole lot about DFS, they see the same. It's kind of like poker, like the way online poker was. I mean, you see the same people winning all the time, and they're like, oh well, it's corrupt or it's whatever. I think one way that would help that is if they came up with some sort of uniform set of rules. And I know DraftKings, they've said to us privately, talking about just DraftKings in general is, one of the things they're looking to be is, very transparent. And I think something that would help that process is, they need to all, just sit down and say, look, this is what's acceptable, this is what isn't, and then just go forward. And I think that probably a little more regulation like that, I think
Right.
would maybe help ease some of the uneasiness about it.
Because I think there's one thing that you're never going to be able to stop is you're never going to be able to stop the transportation of information. I mean, we're all familiar with roto grinders, and they do have a tool on there. I mean, you can optimize a lineup by putting two guys that you think are like if you put Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger into a pool and then you optimize a lineup, it'll computer generate you a lineup. I mean, those things. I don't know. Maybe I'm just that guy that is just thinks it's more enjoyable to just kind of sit there and make your own lineup. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I don't like, that, some of these guys that can just, they can sit there and then they can.
It's like they're looking for a quick buck,
Yeah, and then they can have a computer print out 300 lineups for them when some
and put $1 on them all.
Yeah, and the random person, that would take you like 6 hours to put them all together. That I would say that's an unfair advantage, but I don't. But how do you stop that?
I mean, you don't because to be fair, Roto Grinders charges a ridiculous amount for their subscription. Same with Fantasy Labs. I mean, they charge a pretty heavy amount. So, but I mean, I think you can't charge enough because if you make 300 lineups per day and you put $1 on them for a week, you're bound to make your entry fee back on that Fantasy Labs membership. I mean, one of them's bound to hit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're putting in 1,200 lineups a week, all different, something's bound to return some sort of money to you.
Maybe one of the things that needs to, be part of the the rules for everybody is just the entry limits. I've seen that they've tried to move towards a little more of the entry limit tournaments. Maybe that helps it.
Because I think single entry is the best skill based way you can go. I mean, you get one lineup, you either using a computer generated one that's going to shit the bed, or I mean, you're going to use one that you made yourself that. If you lose, you can't blame anybody but yourself, and that's where a lot of this whole industry becomes corrupt. Is, oh my God, so and so provided me this information, or DraftKings article provided me this information. I followed it, and his pitcher got shelled for 8 innings straight. Now I'm gonna go tweet and bring my concerns up to DraftKings on how terrible they are at their job. It's like it brings all this out.
Yeah, we actually lost our original co-host on our podcast, Eric and I, because of some controversy about what he did, which actually turned out to be nothing.
Really?
Yeah, that's a whole. Maybe I can come back another time and get into that. That's a whole.
I'm interested now.
We had a podcast. We did one episode, and some people got mad about something. He's a lineup provider himself. I guess he has a bunch of trolls, just like anybody who is successful at anything on the internet. Because I got my own group from Not Sports Center on all my accounts. So they tweeted at DraftKings about him, accusing him of breaking the rules, and they pulled the podcast and they pulled him off the show. And now we're on to Between the Lines, and Gary replaced him. So
I think I know who you're talking about.
You probably do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just stuff like that kind of just gets people into interesting situations because, like I said,
what sucks for him though is like they pulled it,
right?
But they didn't establish like there was he had been investigated before, was cleared, was investigated again, was cleared. None of that gets mentioned. The only thing, the random people on Twitter, they just see, oh well, this got pulled off the air. He must have been breaking the rules.
Yeah, and that's
it's unfortunately that's part of the thing. One of the things I hate about social media is you can easily misinterpret. I mean, and this happens every day with video snippets of quote unquote news.
Yeah.
You can easily misinterpret what's happening on Twitter versus what the real situation
And
is.
that's what sucks, and kind of about the position that both of us are in. I'm trying to start this whole podcast going up, and you're on an actual podcast. You almost have to really think about what you're going to say before you're going to say it.
Oh, fun fact or story. The very first time I did an interview, and it's still on YouTube. I actually have the guy blocked now.
Oh man.
Because he got weird, and that's a whole other mess. But when I was doing NotSportsCenter.com about 5-6 years ago, which I've since moved on to, like, I promote a website rather than try to run my own and a bunch of Twitters and be on a podcast. Like, I barely have time to breathe doing that much stuff. But the very first time I did an interview, and it's still on YouTube. I was on the phone. I swore probably 4 or 5 times. And like they were like, taken aback as to, like, I mean, I can tell you really don't care, but they were just like, whoa, you can't do that here. But
I don't know. I think in this industry, I mean, I know the term professionalism is kind of apparent, but the kind of raw, podcasting that I'm trying to create is just, express your emotion, express your feelings, express yourself. Like, obviously don't go overboard like you're like a trucker with a foul mouth, but like if you slip up every once in a while and you're passionate about a subject that we're having a conversation about, I don't really see what's too wrong with that. But this industry takes that stuff very seriously.
oh yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. Like, I was actually getting mad with DraftKings because I would be some of the early episodes I was cracking some jokes, and they're like, well, we just want you to know that this podcast is not an extended arm of Not Sports Center. I'm like, do you guys not realize that is me? That
Your
is not
sense of
Sports
humor.
Center. It's it's me. Like, I can't turn that off. Like, that's my personality. So,
Right.
I think they get that now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've watched.
They've backed off a little bit.
I mean, I've watched it, and it's like, if you have no personality and you're just a guy spewing information, you're as good as a website. Like,
it's boring as hell.
It's so boring.
I've listened to some DFS podcasts, and they're horrible. Like, I put them on to go to sleep.
Name drop some podcasts. The most boring DFS breakdown podcast you've ever heard or been on.
One of, the been on is not an option. But the one that I've heard, well, it's not really. I mean, I can't. There's nobody to name drop. There was the point. But as far as listening goes, who was it by? I think it was one of Osmo's people, actually.
Really?
I was listening to it, like, and they were just so stale. And, like, I mean, look, they were informative. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I mean, I even said this to to Alex from DraftKings when he came to me, and, like, I was officially, first initially asked to do it. I'm like, look, like, you want some personality in a podcast because people aren't going to just listen to, it's almost like I compared it to a law school lecture because I went to law school before I turned into an internet whore. Yeah, I went to law school, and I compared it to listening to a law school lecture, and I was bored to tears in half of law school because the lectures was just awful.
Right.
And some of these podcasts kind of come off that way. Like, well, today in Minnesota, the wind is blowing 7 miles per hour out, and we have pitchers that don't like it when the wind blows out. Like, dude, come on. Like, okay, good. You're being informative. Great. But don't, like, jazz it up.
I mean, just speak as if you're speaking to somebody else, to be honest. I mean, I think, when I do my breakdowns, I try to keep them short and sweet because it's exactly what people want. When I do interviews, it's when I get the lengthy stuff, the 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But, like, when I do breakdowns, I try to keep it below 12 minutes, to be honest, like even below 10.
They want you to get to the point.
I'm running in like, yo, I'm Joe. This is the breakdown. I got pitching I love, bat stacks. Here we go. Let's break it down. Cash games, GPP. Let's just do this. Here are my reasons why. Call it a day. You don't need any more of that. But in interviews, I don't want to sit there and just be the guy just continuously asking questions. I think it's where a lot of people, and that's one thing that a lot of people in this industry don't do. And I was really surprised when I kind of started. And, I planned this podcast for roughly 6 months prior, just kind of gaining information because I wanted to be unique. And it really surprised me that nobody in DFS really interviews anyone.
Yeah,
ever.
I haven't really noticed that. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's weird to me because I'm like, I bet a lot of people would like to hear some opinions, like personal opinions from, as many people as possible in this industry, kind of what they think, and maybe some strategies they may have that you can't tell just from an article that they're writing,
Oh yeah, and then the bad beat stories, which are always funny, and there's definitely lots of interesting talk to be had.
Right. See, right now, what's the most you've ever won in a GPP?
Fourth. I think it was like $4,000.
See, that's pretty good. See, that's the most out of anybody that's ever been on this podcast.
I've also lost a ton too.
Oh, I mean, everybody loses. Everybody loses more than they win, to be honest. Because that's another thing that I would ask. Just a quick question, because I don't want to keep you here for too much longer. But how do you think it's possible to have a full-time career in DFS?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're good enough. I think it's like online poker in a sense that you can really grind your way to the top. But you can't. My two biggest weaknesses are, one, bankroll management. I take too many big chances, and when I lose,
you lose 40 in a day, and then you're like, "Fuck it, got to make it up. Not time to drop 100."
Yeah, it's that tilt. It's that tilt factor. It really is. It gets to you. That's one. Two. I'm so preoccupied with everything else that I do. I don't really have the time to sit down, and I think this is where the providers come in, and they can be helpful. Is not a lot of people just don't have the time to really research and do your homework about who you're playing. And when you try to half-ass play DFS, you get killed.
Oh, for sure. And I think that a lot of people, and this is a mistake that I made when I first started out. Now, mind you, I've been playing for about 5 years, so. And nowhere near am I a professional, but a lot of people play their favorite players. It's just facts. It's just how it is. Yeah. And on it, I would love to play the Cubs every day because I'm a massive Cubs fan. They're gonna get blanked some days. It's just gonna happen. And if I play them on games where they're facing Clayton Kershaw in Los Angeles, they're not going to put up 10 runs. It's just not going to happen. And a lot of people love to play their favorite players. That's why they'll consistently lose because, they see. And another thing I also see is playing high-priced players because they're high-priced because they think that DraftKings priced them high because they're going to hit 2 homers.
Yeah, that's the basic thinking, I guess, is when you first. Because when you first sit down and you haven't really played much before, you're like, well, how can I squeeze every good talented guy into my lineup? And then you've got a bunch of minimum price guys who aren't going to do jack.
Right.
And your lineup sucks because there's no balance to it.
That's what I think people don't understand is pitching before hitting. It's just going to be a staple, especially in MLB. Like I said, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir as everybody says pitching before hitting, but seriously.
Oh yeah. For me, just in sports in general, granted this comes from being a longtime Bears fan, but I'm a defense wins championships guy.
Oh, for sure. The Bears are going to be great this year, just letting you know. Just hope you know.
And for what it's worth, I got some good mileage out of Trubisky. He was underpriced for most of the season.
Oh yeah, I got a lot out of Trubisky as well as Cohen. So.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be underpriced again this year, too.
So do I.
I think people forget about his running ability, which is very big in football DFS.
Well, you're going to have to stay tuned because what I'm doing here coming up soon, I got something brewing. I'm doing a free-to-enter league for anybody who's ever been on my podcast, $1,000 prize for free.
Don't say brewing, though.
No, it's happening.
There we go. Okay.
It's
Oh
happening.
yeah. I'm okay. Good. I'm down. I'm ready.
Yeah, it's straight out of my pocket. I'm just giving back to everybody. I think it'd be some fun stuff. Maybe get a few people that are like subscribers or whatever. If I've had somebody on who's not a big football fan, but I want to have some friendly competition here and see what goes on, how people pick their lineups and stuff like that. So
Sweet.
that's definitely coming soon. But yeah, I mean, just from a DFS standpoint, I think that people just have a big misconception of how to play MLB, especially new coming people. And same with basketball and football. It's just a misconception to pick all these, high price guys and favorite players, and you're going to lose every time. There's just a lot of people that just don't.
It's very much a skill game, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
people don't realize that. And it's just like with
Well, because it's fun. That's the
with
problem.
poker. Well, yeah, but even with poker too, like everybody thought like, oh well, poker's just it's gambling because you're just playing the cards. But you're not just playing the cards for people who actually know what they're doing. You're playing your opponent. You're playing their tendencies, or are they really tight? Do they like to bluff a lot?
Right.
It's the same thing in DFS.
And you're playing the chalk in DFS, or you're playing on it or against it. That's exactly. I mean, that's like.
Oh yeah,
exactly what you're doing.
Bankroll management is in itself, and not just in DFS, but in life in general.
I mean, I don't think I'll ever have bankroll management when it comes to DFS.
Yeah,
so I'm just being honest.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we all suck at bankroll management, like in or outside of in DFS or outside of DFS. But I mean, that alone is a skill game.
Exactly. And it's just what makes it fun, though. Like it's going to continue to make it fun. I mean, as these new players, up and coming players, stuff like that, it just continuously adds to the game.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I played single game the other night with the Warriors and was all on Durant.
Yep, so was I. I had him captain.
And yep, me too.
And I mean, I will play every slate. Like I will play every slate because I'm like that bored. Like, maybe I'm missing out on something. Maybe this lineup I throw in for $5 that I made in 3 seconds will cash me 5,000. It's just those what ifs that get me sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It really is. It really is. You get that FOMO.
Yeah, no kidding. So, well, I think we kind of covered the bases of industry talk, MLB talk, and all that. I want to go ahead and thank Will for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate the talk and the knowledge and just the backstory of how you came to be in this industry. So just for anybody who's listening to this podcast, for me personally, go sign in or go follow Will on Twitter at notscwill. And then go follow at Not Sports Center, which is his other Twitter as well. And then if you wouldn't mind going and subscribing and giving a listen to the Between the Lines podcast. Also, please go ahead and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and Apple and all other platforms. Follow this podcast on Twitter at FantasyDigest_. And yeah, thanks again, Will, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate all the talk. Hope you enjoyed yourself and had a great time.
Yeah, man, it was great. I'm looking forward to this league. I'm ready to throw down.
I know you're already getting ready. I can tell. He can start doing his research right after this.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Alrighty. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.